and welcome to Off-Grid Journey. I am your host, Drew Lamb. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Off-Grid Journey and at offgridjourney.com. And we are live on the UCY network. If you're picking this up in syndication, we are at ucy.tv/OGJ. And there are a lot of really cool shows on the UCY network. Off-Grid's one of them, but there's lots of awesome shows on there. So make sure you log on there and check it out. And today, Rick Mori returns to the show. Rick was on a few weeks ago, and Rick is the owner of Southern Oregon Greenhouse Supply. And Rick and I can just get going and talk for hours and hours. And the last time that I had Rick on, we didn't really get into the topic that I'd hoped to get into, which was specifically greenhouse gardening. And that's, well, Rick has a lot of specialties, but I think that gardening in greenhouses is his greatest skill. And also, his wife Anna might be joining us today. I'm not sure if she's with us or not, but hopefully she will jump in because I have some questions for her if she's available. I wanted to let everybody know that we are sponsored by Pyramid Pure Foods Aquaponics Farm. And that is my business where I raise bass and catfish and bluegill and microgreens. And I sell those locally. However, I do have some products that we're developing that we can ship out anywhere within the continental U.S. And one of them is my black soldier fly compost inoculator that you can use to get started with raising black soldier flies so that you can turn your food scraps into high-protein feed for your chickens and your fish. And the best way to get that is to go to ladybugindoorgardens.com and give them a call. I don't think my product is available for purchase directly through their site, but they are the ones that are handling the distribution for me and can get you hooked up. So definitely check that out. And also check out their sister site, naturescontrol.com, where you can get solutions for pest control without using poisons. They have hired bugs that you can use to fight the bad bugs. Good bugs versus bad bugs. That company, I'm just going to go off track a little bit here. That company was actually started by my stepfather, Don Jackson, back around 1979 or 1980 when I was just a kid. And he was one of the early pioneers of using beneficial insects for organic gardening. And he was very much against pesticides. And we had a lot of gardens, and we had greenhouses and pretty elaborate hydroponic setups. And that's why I'm into what I'm into now, really. And my brother took over those businesses a few years ago. But Don just passed away in July. We had a wake for him yesterday, and had a little ceremony where his ashes were sprinkled into Cow Creek up in the Azalea area where he lived, in a straw bale house that he just constructed. And I'd have to say that Don was the single most influential person in my life. And so his presence is going to be missed terribly. He wasn't doing so much with Nature's Control and Ladybug Indoor Gardens after my brother Nathan took over the company, but he was working on some other things, primarily renewable energy projects, home power type projects. And so he was doing some work with wind and water power generation up on his properties. And I'm sure at some point he would have come up with some ingenious invention that he would have brought to the marketplace. And so I found it just really unfortunate being up at his place yesterday and seeing, projects unfinished. And so I don't know if they ever will be unfinished or finished or not, but we live our life like we're going to live forever, and it just isn't so. So we make the best of our time while we're here. But also, I think it's really important to, bring people into your life that have things that they could share and teach you. And Rick Mori, who's with us today, is one of those guys who I look up to greatly and value his knowledge and advice. And I plan to absorb as much of it as I possibly can while we have the time. Rick, welcome to the show.
Ruth, thank you for having me once again. Ann and I both extend our condolences on the passing of Don. We never had the luxury of making his acquaintance, but oddly, we follow in his footsteps. We are beekeepers, and while not politically correct, our attitude towards pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, and whatever inert ingredients are, is definitely not positive because of the effects that we're seeing with our bees. So we practice, to the best of our ability, integrated pest management. And just this Monday, our regional rep at OSU, Ramesh Sangali, showed us a video of a parasitic wasp that, while it can't puncture the exoskeleton of the honeybee's worst pest, Varroa destructor, we saw under 400 magnification these tiny little parasitic wasps tearing the legs off of the Varroa. So while it's yet to be shown effective enough for the commercial growers, my mentor and myself, we've already experimented with this, and we weren't seeing, and I think it was, admittedly, we rushed it, but we weren't seeing fast enough results, and we also didn't apply it in the way that he showed in his video. So we abandoned the use of these parasitic wasps to fight Varroa and have gone back to various organic, natural oils in different compounds. But the goal is to raise a quality of bee in conjunction with integrated pest management that we can get beyond Varroa destructor and all of the pathogens and viruses that they penetrate to suck the bee's blood. Just like a mosquito, there's an exchange, and these pathogens and viruses are proving over a season rather than a short exposure to be lethal. So we're following in Don's footsteps. We realize that we've got to find, if we haven't, quite frankly, found it already, and our grandparents knew it, and they practiced it with great results, and that is we're growing in the following manner. We use a propagating greenhouse to start our seeds, often right around Valentine's Day. We use heat mats that, folks, you can find at Nature's Control. They're at the shops at Exit 24 in Phoenix, Oregon. And these heat mats, in conjunction with the thermostat, allow that magic to happen where, by maintaining constant soil temperature, we are fooling the seeds into thinking it's spring. So up they come, and we presently make our own potting soil. We rewash and recycle our 3.5-inch pots, re-sterilize them, and our goal is by the traditional date of sale, which until the last couple of years was historically Mother's Day, and I think you would agree, Drew, we're seeing that moved up a bit, don't you?
Yeah, I have noticed that, actually.
Not only that, but our harvest this year of our both our stone fruit, our pears, was at least a week to 2 weeks earlier than we had ever expected or experienced. So,
yeah, so we had an unusually hot summer.
It was. It was. We used an awful lot of water, oftentimes just to keep things alive. Rather than thrive, it was, we were just trying to keep things alive. Water is getting to be ultra serious for all of us. And so we, as much as being beekeepers, do not practice any insecticides or pesticides in our greenhouse. We are living now, we've moved from elevation 1,400 feet to elevation 1,700 feet. And so there's going to be a little adjustment in terms of, we suspect we're going to use a little more fossil fuel than we typically would have to, because when we're raising starts from seeds, and by the way, I think like you, Drew, we are seed savers. We buy heirloom or organic seed that will reproduce itself. Thank you very much. And by holding the air temperature inside our propagating greenhouse at a mere 45 degrees Fahrenheit, but the soil temperature underneath all of these myriad, flat after flat after flat, of 3.5-inch pots, they think it's spring, up they come. So the shortcut I tell people is, as long as their feet are warm, our little starts don't mind if their shoulders are cool. Mm-hmm. So we're not unfamiliar with hydroponics. I was fooling around with hydroponics in the early days of college while I was working for a nursery that was pretty much on the cutting edge of a lot of this, and this is dating myself. This is back in the 70s. And there's a lot to be said for hydroponics, as well as that incredible venture of yours in aquaponics. But growing hydroponically in a greenhouse has got some unique challenges, some very unique challenges. The purity of your water, your what you start with, is really important, and oftentimes, as you know, there's a fairly sophisticated filtration system in so that your water medium, which is going to carry your nutrients, is as clean and as pure as you and I used to enjoy as kids. Mm-hmm. The filter medium today, in some cases, is merely the seed mass from whatever it is you're raising. There are other mediums that the nutrient solution that is flood drained to produce some pretty amazing results. Mm-hmm. You know that there are over 7 relatively small fish farms here in Jackson County. Mm-hmm. They're not nearly as advanced in as you in terms of having figured out how to raise your own fish food and kind of close that one end of that cycle you too are discovering the need for a little more filtration than you earlier thought was needed to get the solids out of your fish waste stream and let the nutrients go on to nurture all of those microgreens. So all that is, it intrigues me to no end. But here's what I'm beginning to have a little more understanding of, Drew, and that is what we're talking about there is awful fossil fuel intensive. The trays that you are flooding and let draining are made out of PVC. Mm-hmm. The plumbing for most of this is, again, all PVC. The energy to run all this is, again, all fossil fuel. If, by some chance, your pumps were to catastrophically fail and you didn't have the wisdom to have that critical backup pump in stock sitting in a storage room, you could have, like any other farmer, catastrophic crop failure.
Well, I experienced something recently. I lost 300 pounds of fish.
Oh, my Lord.
Months ago. And I basically had like a perfect storm of system failures. And,
oh, Lord.
And, and I was, I was running at like the expert level with super high density of fish per gallon of water, plus water temperatures up around the 80s, and then like what you brought up with I have a lot of solids that have built up in my gravel beds over the last few years, and those consume a lot of oxygen. And all it took for everything to crash was for one of my sump tanks to get pulled down a little too low in the water level, and my pump pulled some air, and so that system failed. And then I had the filtration system running and 2 air pumps going, but that still wasn't enough to get oxygen into the water. At that warm water temperature, it's hard to hold in the oxygen. And so, and it just so happened that was a day I had to go do some off-site work for a few hours, and so I was gone, for a bit, and came in later than I normally would, and came into a bunch of dead fish. I lost all of my mature bluegill, all of my mature bass, and my entire, fall harvest at least, was gone, but I still have several thousand fish left. They just, I gotta keep them alive and fatten them up. And so what I don't like having, things so fragile like that. And so it's really important to have redundant systems, to have off-grid systems as well as on-the-grid systems, and so I've learned a lot from the experience, and actually I knew that the potential for what could happen, and was already working on solutions. It's just that I didn't work fast enough, and I knew what was coming, and I knew that I was just like one power outage away from disaster. And now, and there's things you could do to prevent some things like that from happening, like with the power going out. You just have a battery charger, run into a battery bank, and use that for your backup system, and you can get a lot out of that if you've got redundant DC pumps, air pumps, and water pumps, and so it's absolutely important to have those things in place, and then and it's good to monitor your oxygen levels. I like to be up around 4 or 6 parts per million, and it was down to 1.5 parts per million. And so that's how you end up with dead fish. And catfish are pretty tolerant of low oxygen levels. So I was amazed that they were hit so hard. And so, not to get off the subject, but yeah, these kinds of things are very, very challenging. And again, I'm running on the commercial level and really pushing things. So if you
put a plug in for your whole industry, Drew, I'm going to look forward to the day when there's going to be a trade publication available to those of you, and you're on the cutting edge of many of this, but already I surmise that you can envision, excuse the cliche, but there'll be an app for this, and you'll carry a smartphone or a phablet, and it will alert you to your primary pump just went down, or the pH is at a critical level, and it'll make it easier for you to go on and expand the marketing that's going to help, endear you to more people. It's in the greenhouse management, if you chose to, the ability to digitize almost every function but harvest.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's always a however, there's always a trade-off. The capital that is involved to install all of this, then train your employees as to what it all means, when many times the people that gravitate towards working in a greenhouse, unless it's a pure hydroponic play or a hydroponic aquaculture hybrid, they're used to working in the dirt. And all this new digitized system that oftentimes promises you tremendous results in tremendous heartbreak.
Yeah, it really can. I was devastated, and I'm still licking my wounds from the whole thing. Another good thing to have as a backup system is just a tank of oxygen,
mm-hmm.
and a regulator, and
sure.
and have that going through a diffuser. And even better yet, to have that automated. So
that's all within the realm of possibility. For heaven's sakes, they already offer that to the people in the medical community. So getting oxygen and timers, and the aquarium trade must have some bubble mats that can be plumbed into that perks this up through. Rather than just a hose sticking in, the
Sure.
medium.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, it was a tough learning experience. The worst part of it all was that I've worked every day for 17 months, and so I'd worked really hard on that crop of fish. So it's
frugal as you are, Drew. What happened to the carcasses? Are they enriching the soil or in your freezer?
Well, here's the deal: is I bagged them up, and I put some in the fridge and some in the freezer, and I've been running them through my black soldier fly composting units, and I will recover about 25% of that material in larval mass, which will in turn be used for either fish feed or my inoculator product that other people can buy. And so it wasn't all for naught, and it wasn't a complete waste. And so right now in my current insectary, they're going through about 20 to 25 of those fish per day. So we've gotten through most of it already, and I've been amazed. The temperatures stay pretty warm in my greenhouse / shop, and so those guys are really active, and they render those fish just to nothing very fast. So and it's helped me to understand how feasible it would be to use black soldier flies in other applications, like processing chicken offal, for example. I've been doing a little consulting work for one of my customers, and they raise organic chickens, and they were trying to find a solution for composting their chicken offal when they processed the chickens, and also they needed to reduce the cost of their chicken feed, which the organic chicken feed is so expensive that their chickens cost them roughly $200 a bird after all is said and done. So with the black soldier flies, I'm trying to work up a solution for them that covers both those bases, dealing with the offal and rendering that into a high protein feed for the chickens, and you don't get into that that weird mad cow disease kind of stuff, because you're talking the insects are processing this material, and I don't think you could do this yet in Europe. You can't. I think they still have regulations that won't allow black soldier flies to be used for livestock feed. I don't know how that applies to chickens or not. We don't have the same regulations over here. So one thing I wanted to get into, is the weather is getting colder. Those of us that want to garden year round are going to be relying upon our greenhouses, and I know I am. And so as we're coming into fall here and harvesting, we also have to start thinking about what's next, what crops are going to go in next, and what systems do we need in place. And I was hoping that you could give us some advice on, what are some of the best setups to have, with a greenhouse design and greenhouse systems, if you're going to run your greenhouse through the winter.
Well, oddly enough, through the National Conservation Resource Service and that agency, the government is subsidizing the price of a roughly 2,100 square foot greenhouse here in Jackson County. And the only caveat is it can have no appliances.
Mm-hmm.
Weather in this county is still, quote, manageable enough that a simple device like a roll-up sidewall curtain, or plural, or actually what you can appreciate this for your off-grid persona. What we're pursuing, Anna and I, is more and more ways to grow food year-round using, we both admit to embedded energy in the steel frames, embedded energy into the poly cover, but we don't grow color. We don't grow flower. We don't raise poinsettias. We do store dwarf citrus. We're successful in raising limes, oranges, and lemons here, and blue agave cactus we're successful at. And we're finding different ways to put these into the greenhouse, as well as grow winter crops. Now, we're more or less compelled to use raised beds with gopher armor.
Yeah.
The pocket squirrels and the gophers out here would keep an army of cats busy, because you merely add water and the furrowing begins.
Yes.
So it doesn't prevent us, however, from raising those crops that will poke up through the snow if you've heavily mulched your late fall soil as it goes into winter. Now, those that don't have greenhouses, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but just here on the 11th, the Extension Center put on a seminar of extending your growing season. Well, how do we do that? Well, there's some really simple techniques, but let's just stick to going into winter. So now is an ideal time to be planting your garlic, your onions, your Swiss chard, your kale, many of your brassicas, because you may not see results right away, but late into winter, you're going to have a crop. And that can even include potatoes, rutabagas, turnips, and beets, because the mere fact that you have this shelter over your growing medium allows you to take advantage of all of the solar gain during our short winter days. And so that in the winter, what we're doing is using, depending on how much you want to buy, we're as frugal as the next farmers. Ours are just merely manual curtain rods that we can successfully roll up and roll down up to a 96-foot long sidewall curtain. So by putting these on both sides of the greenhouse and being able to open up the front and the back, when appropriate, put on a piece of shade cloth, we're able to do a lot more in the summer in the greenhouse that we normally would not have been able to do, because it would have required a extensive fossil fuel bill to create the right growing conditions so that your what you're raising in summer doesn't get so hot it begins to actually denature. Mm-hmm. Photosynthesis, as we all know, stops at 95 degrees with the exception of a few peppers. Mm-hmm. Going into winter, we, like you, practice no-till. We do our best to leave the areas where we do fluff up the soil dedicated to our carrot beds. But the rest of it, because of the, we talked about it in our last show, the secret to how we think we're getting the results that we do is we subscribe to that mantra: feed the soil feeds the plants feed us. Hmm. So this is not the time of the year where we stop composting. If anything, we're bugging the neighbors to let us put a 5-gallon bucket, and we'll come by every third day so there's not an offensive smell, because we don't want to get dependent on fossil fuel inputs that in any manner are going to make it that much harder to be beekeepers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the only time that I've had to snake out a long extension cord and put up a fairly good-sized pedestal fan is here in Jackson County. It doesn't happen very often, and up where I live, it's even less so. But we do get, especially around fair weather, do get those days where it is blazingly hot and absolutely no wind. The inversion is set, the valley gets full of smog, and there's no breeze.
Right.
Well, as you can imagine, the temperatures inside, underneath, even though the sidewall curtains are up and the end wall curtains are up, but there's no breeze blowing.
Right.
It is, or so little wind as to be, not amount to anything. Just having a fan to help move that stagnant air out and make room for slightly cooler air can sometimes make the difference between a 25% loss in productivity for that particular crop. Mm-hmm. So too much sun is just as bad as too much water. It's a balance that we seek. So in winter, now in our prop houses, because they're small and we try to keep a real close eye on things. We don't want to possibly vector in anything while we're raising these delicate little starts. We use a very inexpensive, very efficient 110-volt baseboard heater with a thermostat. It sits on a platform, so it's not on the ground, because all of our heat mats are on grow tables. Mm-hmm. And we watch the weather very carefully. We listen to NOAA weather like every other farmer every night. And when the forecast is for a hard freeze, well, we have these small 10,000 BTU, rather efficient greenhouse heaters, and we put that on so that, again, we keep to our goal. The inner temperature, with everything shut down, stays about 45 degrees during the coldest period. Now, for those folks that have room, some of the tools that are available on the market, for those that have bigger wallets than I do, we now have 4-inch deep, 4 feet wide, 10 feet long waterbed mattresses in a steel frame that you fill up with hot water, or fill up with water. The sun takes this black waterbed mattress and makes the water inside of it blazingly warm, and as the sun goes down, that water radiates, of course, into the greenhouse. Mm-hmm. For those that don't have deep wallets, I get food-grade 55-gallon steel drums with a lid and the locking ring. I don't want to be breeding mosquitoes. Uh-huh. And I put that in a position to let the sun heat those up, and we'll often raise starts on top of those on a pallet, and those are a very inexpensive way to put in a solar heat sink so that we can truly practice growing food off the grid. I still haven't mastered the ability to get my irrigation system totally off the grid. I'm still dependent on AC, but the goal, like you, is to have a redundancy so that we had the power go out for, and it happens quite regularly up here, we had the power go out for, 8 or 9 hours, but you can imagine if it was 8 or 9 days, that'd be a disaster.
Yeah.
The freezers would be rotting. The starts would be freezing. I have successfully heated a greenhouse with a wood stove, but I'm admitting that I got a bit cranky to have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go stoke the stove.
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
that would not be fun. I remember when I was a teenager, I'd go out and smudge the orchards, and we'd have to get up at about 2 or 3 in the morning and right out to the orchard, get our pisser full of diesel and go and light them up, and that was miserable work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not fun having to get up at that time to go save crops. What do you think of supplemental lighting? I put together a small solar power system that I've run some LED lights on in my greenhouse that I bought from you, my Applegate model, and it's I like to think that I've experienced greater yields from my plants by extending the days a little bit. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's bound to be true that if you can create a longer period of the right wavelength of light, you're going to get measurable, better, or shall we say, stronger results. There'll be more of a yield. At the same time as I acknowledge that, though, I cannot tell you, do the numbers pencil out?
Right.
The other thing that I have a very difficult time keeping track of is the incredible advances in both the lumens and the energy efficiency of these artificial light systems. I'm online subscriber to Greenhouse Management, and though they warn us about being careful to stay away from some of these very, very, very modestly priced LED systems, they have discovered they start fires. They don't live up to the energy conservation promise that's made. They're almost impossible to repair. But the more reputable firms are putting out some incredibly more efficient LED, compact fluorescent. It's almost impossible to keep up because of the advances, just keeping one after the other. I'm sure you're following a little bit this urban farming trend where we're going to grow vertically now.
Right. Yeah, I follow that closely.
And so, the way that works is with artificial light.
Right.
And the capital costs for that are coming down significantly. The energy efficiency is going up significantly. I'm just wondering, is that in our best long-term view, is that our best solution, or is that going to remain a bit of a niche? Those on a farm that know how to start from seed, know the importance of good inputs, whether it's clean water or clean poo. We know what to look for, and everybody out here is trying their best to minimize their energy footprint, just because it's a good farming principle.
Right, and the sun is out there. You got the sun. You need to use it, and that is the challenge with this urban farming trend. You're using a lot of lights, and some of the setups I've seen were LEDs, but if the grid goes down, those systems are going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about my most of my show last week with Matthew Stein was devoted to scenarios that would cause the grid to go down for weeks, months, even potentially decades. So it's a matter of when it's going to happen, not if.
Oh, I complete agreement.
Yeah, and so I think it's dangerous to become too dependent upon designs like that. What do you think of carbon dioxide supplementation?
Well, I know some of my buyers go visit your brother and buy the components to do that. The carbon dioxide measurements in our background right now are through the roof, and that's over baseline pre-industrial revolution, of course. And we, again, limiting our inputs to that black gold that compost eventually becomes, good sources of rabbit, alpaca, and llama plop, and we're willing to, even on a much longer term, compost cattle and horse plop. It's just, it has to be composted to that 140-degree core temperature that kills those silly weeds.
Right.
That just make it that much more work.
Right.
Feed primarily the crop we're trying to raise. We, being beekeepers, know that a lot of weeds is bee feed, so we're not too zealots about weeds, but it's raising food, whether it's on an urban scale, a small farm scale, anything where control is, watching your inputs is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more work than industrial farming, let's face it. Go burn off the weeds with one thing of Roundup, plant your crop, one more application, and, you can sit inside and watch the corn grow.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, you and I don't experience a day like that.
No.
And we have to, consequently, our labor input is high. Therefore, for this to anywhere pencil out, our input cost has to be low, very, very low. Hence, a modest source of good, clean water. Being careful not to accidentally introduce some of pests and pathogens by the simple technique of having an alcohol rag to wipe off the blade of the nippers and the pruners.
Uh-huh.
We try to keep current with all the new advances in IPM, but the nematodes and the lacewings and the ladybugs and the parasitic wasps that are available at nature's control, for most of us, certainly anything in the 5 to 10 acre range, is a lot easier on your wallet than some of the pesticides. B, you don't have to have a tractor and a spray rig to use them.
Uh-huh.
And C, you don't have to have a diesel tank on your farm to feed the tractor that drags the tank that,
Right.
So when we hear those rather specious arguments that these mammoth industrial farms put out food at a better rate than we can, that's because they don't factor in the, dare I say it, the leaching of the nutrients of the soil, mm-hmm. the toxic bloom at the mouth of the Mississippi because of all the nutrient runoff. Mm-hmm. We're not creating that kind of a mess.
Right.
And the day is here when those social costs, the cost to the commons, has to be factored in. Mm-hmm. We're past the time when we can ignore that. Mm-hmm. So while our manual labor input and oversight has to be a bit more than 2 tractor rides a year, mm-hmm. The results are, as you and I have talked endlessly, the results are we are able to eat, give, sell, share food that we're completely welcoming and comfortable to have you come out and see how we do it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So our suggestion for those of you listeners that are going into winter is as much as we would love to have you as buyers, there are some simple methods out there to extend your growing season and even to grow into winter. And a lot of these were covered in the seminar down there at the Extension Center, Maud Pell and that wonderful group of folks. But it's as simple as row covers. You can take 1 inch, 3/4 inch PVC and make a relatively same size hoop, sticking the ends into a 2x6 where there's a snug hole drilled in, and you send in a toe screw, and any one of us that sells the 6-year, 4-year poly with about a 93% light transmission, again, it's the ability to trap the solar gain and allow that soil to warm up and very, very slowly radiate that heat out during the night or the 3 or 4 days when it's substantially overcast. But the mere fact that there's no wind in your row cover, nowhere for the air and soil that's enjoying this free solar gain to escape, and you can use sandbags. There's all kinds of little techniques to close off your row cover, and here your input costs are very, very modest. The extension of your growing season and the ability to eat fresh is extended. And here's a tip for your listeners that want to get an earlier start. Again, extend your growing season. So you want to get an earlier start in spring than the conventional May the 1st, May the 11th window. Well, after the last of the worst of our rains, take a piece of that very same poly and merely lay it on the ground and lay enough rocks on it so the wind doesn't blow it away. And abracadabra, the sun shines through that poly, the soil warms up, and you can take an AM soil temperature, and when you're at 50, even if it's April, the plants will survive as long as you have the little poly cover on at night, and you can just merely drape it over them with a couple of tomato cages, and you can get a start. And if you talk to some of your listeners that are living in the Mount Ashland area or the Prospect area, or up there in the 3,000 to 4,000 foot elevation, this is the technique or techniques that are used when your growing season, without a little bit of help, can be as short as 8 or 9 weeks. So we raise starts for both elevations. The folks in Prospect who don't raise their own starts, they need a 1 gallon, very, very robust start that even may be starting to flower, because by the time they put it into the ground, it needs to get going right away so that they have a crop before the first hard freeze. So it's either you add row covers, smudge pots are pretty stinky.
Yep.
A lot of the folks with respiratory ailments, they don't appreciate us lighting those off. So Anna and I are constantly batting back and forth. What can we do to lower our energy footprint? Conservation is the low-hanging fruit, of course. And so we practice that, I think, as well or as much as anybody. And the next low-hanging fruit is using the sun to do the heavy lifting. Yeah, we're not, and I can't foresee, Drew, in total honesty, I can't foresee the day, as long as it's available, where we would truly live a fossil-free existence.
Mm-hmm.
The tractor, let's face it, does the work of 10 men.
Right.
And I don't have 10 men. So, while we salute you in your efforts to promote off-the-grid living, lower your energy footprint, for those that can, eliminate your energy footprint, it's better for all of us. We all benefit from that. So, yeah, we look to more from you on off-the-grid technology, off-the-grid tips, techniques. This is some good stuff.
Well, thank you very much, Rick. And we have about a minute left. How can people get in touch with you? What's your website address?
Our website is Southern Oregon Greenhouse Supply Inc.com.
Okay, and you also have a Facebook page, I believe.
I'm having kittens with Facebook. I'm loath to give out our Facebook page until we get some of these issues resolved. Ann and I have a great deal of respect for all of our buyers, and we comply with the law. We keep the minimum amount of records, but we don't intrude on what our growers do or don't do, our position.
We're out of time.
Thank you, Drew.